Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Oh wait, so as a finance major, you're coding a solution as a finance major?
Coding solutions?
No, well, yeah, are you coding like an MVP, like as a finance major?
Oh, no. I just want to know more of the stuff because, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, yeah, no worries. So this is, well, since y'all are a small group, we just ask questions along the way. My name is Sybil Yang. I'm the Faculty Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship here at San Francisco State University. So all the programming that we run, I kind of oversee the programming itself. So feel free to ask about any related programming along the way. But today is focused on MVPs, viable products, and how to create them, how to plan for them, and where they kind of fit in your entire journey of starting a startup. So first thing that I want to make sure that we all kind of get straight is that before you go out and build it, you kind of want to be sure about what product or service it is that you're actually trying to sell and create. Oftentimes, founders, they have a vague idea of an app that they want to do, or they want to do something with AI, or they want to do something with like machine learning. They get married to a tool and they want to build a solution around that tool. And then they go looking for a problem that tool will go ahead and solve. That's completely the wrong order sequence that you want to go in as a founder. So to step back a little bit, what people generally think of is they come up with an idea, then they do all the business stuff, like get your LLC, get a name, get a website, you spend all of this money setting up a shell of a business and you feel like you're making a lot of progress. And then you're like, I have this business, I have this idea, it's time to go out and find investors. This is exactly the wrong sequence that you want to go for. So before you head on down this path, you want to do this. You want to do this. So start off by identifying a market problem that you want to address and solve, first and foremost. So find something painful, something that works too slowly, is too frustrating, costs too much money, creates too many mistakes. There's got to be a problem that you are pretty familiar with or that you have been told about and have access to people who know a lot about that particular problem. You don't want to go into a space where you don't understand what the underlying problem actually is. So first thing to do, identify a problem. So if you're coming up with a babysitter app, you better know a lot about the babysitting space, either because you are a babysitter or because you have children and you look for babysitters. So find something that you are intimately familiar with. The second thing you need to do is treat that problem as a hypothesis. I hypothesize that people have this problem. And not only the problem exists, but that you understand the root causes of that problem. So identify what that problem is, and then you need to find what I call proof of concept. And you're going to hear this a lot from investors and partners out there is, do you have proof of concept for your idea? What they mean by proof of concept is you have this concept of what this problem is, what causes this problem, and that you have some sort of solution for this problem. They want proof. They want proof that this problem exists, that you understand what the underlying causes of the problem actually are. Because if you know the problem exists, but you don't know why it exists, you're back to square one. So you know that the problem exists, you know what the causes of that problem might actually be, and then you have a proposed solution for that problem. All of that is going to form like hypotheses. I hypothesize that this is a problem. I hypothesize that this is why the problem exists. I hypothesize that this might be a way in which I can solve the root cause of the problem. Those are all hypotheses that you have to prove out. It can get expensive to prove out, but it can also be really cheap. So oftentimes when people come up with a problem and then they think of a possible solution for the problem, they want to go out and start coding. Like start building the app that's gonna match up people. They're gonna like start building the machine that's gonna like solve people's problems. coding stuff is expensive and building a prototype can get expensive. So what you want to be able to do is to test your hypotheses cheap and test it out super cheaply. And this is where the MVP comes in. So as part of the proof of concept portion of this journey, you're going to build out an MVP. So a minimally viable product. It's minimally viable. It's not just a prototype where people can look at it and imagine things, but the MVP actually viably works. It works in some way as a real solution that people can test out to see whether or not it actually solves their problem. So you have a couple of objectives with your MVP. Your MVP is used to get you proof of concept, to prove that the problem exists, prove that you are addressing the root cause of this problem, and proves that your suggested solution can solve the root causes and the problem. Yeah. Once you achieve proof of concept, then you can go and test out the product market fit. So an MVP, it's minimally viable. It's not going to be scalable, right? It's not meant to be scalable. It's just to test out your hypothesis. Once your MVP proves out your hypotheses and more people want your solution because it's a problem, it's a painful problem. And so once people find a solution for that problem, they're going to demand more and more of it. And they're going to tell other people who know about this problem, about this great solution. Once you reach the point where your MVP cannot handle the demand, that's when you have product market fit. You have a product that fits with what the market needs at this point. That's when you go out and you need to find investors and resources, because now you need to code up a product. Now you actually need to get the AutoCAD designers in to build out the prototype itself and send it off to manufacturing. All the way up until this point, you still don't need a lot of financing, to be honest, because you are bootstrapping to test out your hypotheses. Once you achieve enough product market fit, enough people are demanding your MVP can't handle this volume, then you go out and look for investors. And it makes it easier for you to find investors because now you can point to all this demand, right? And so you have a great problem at this point because overwhelming demand, not enough supply, and now you have a growth story in front of you. Yeah. So this is the order in which you want to do stuff. MVP stuff falls into this area. I'm assuming already that you've already done all the market research and the consumer behavior stuff, the surveying, the testing to find out whether that problem exists. And enough of that, primary research to find out what the causes of these problems actually are. Any questions so far? Or thoughts, confusions? I know I'm moving pretty quickly, but that's okay. Okay, so just to kind of summarize what we've talked about, that is the path that people used to take. You write down your little idea on a napkin, you take it to investors, and then the investors like, oh my God, this is fantastic. They write you a check. You start coding and developing, the actual product itself. You roll it out, people love it, you grow, you get a couple of paying customers, and then you test it further with customers, right? And that's how you iterate. You test it with the full product, and then you go back and you iterate and then test it out again with more customers. This is how it used to be in order to achieve product market fit. Nowadays, it looks like this. It's all messed up because investors are really looking for a lot more safety and a lot more assurance. Product market fit needs to happen sooner, and you need proof of concept sooner rather than later. So you're not getting funding until then. So whatever MVP you're putting together needs to be done on the cheap. Done on the cheap, meaning maybe you have an angel, but most likely it's going to be you and your co-founders. And you're bringing on co-founders to do all the grunt work along with you on this MVP. Okay, so we've talked a lot about what MVPs actually do. I'm going to clarify a few things. So MVP, minimally viable product. Already talked a little bit about that. Another kind of intermediary step before you launch a whole product of some sort is you have a minimally repeatable product. So the MVP, right, it's just viable enough to solve a person's problem. It's not very scalable. You might want to create a slightly more scalable version of your MVP. And we'll talk about how you might want to do this, but you want to create something not full blown, not like, truly coded out or anything like that, but you have some sort of interim step where it's like moderately scalable instead of like, handling maybe a dozen or so, customers, maybe you handle, a few dozen, 100 or so customers, just so you can now test out whether your concept can be financially viable also. You want to get enough volume in here where you really start to understand what customers like, don't like, really want, that you're missing right now. So here you have a relatively small sample size. You could only have so many people using this MVP. You make it a little bit bigger to get a little bit more volume in so you can have a better idea of what the boundary conditions are of what your customers like, don't like, how they use it, what their expectations are. You want a full view of what this product needs to look like so you can have good specs when you actually go out and start to build out your product. Way too often, people come up with whatever the solution is. They have it like maybe drafted out in their mind. They don't talk to customers yet at this point. They draw it completely out in Figma. They put sketches together and then they go out onto like Fiverr or onto some like, outsourcing hubs and say, okay, I need developers to start coding stuff out. Here's the Figma for it. And then they spend tens of thousands of dollars coding out things only to realize that this is not at all what customers are expecting, right? And what I have drafted out is completely in the wrong direction. You want to clean that stuff up here, right? You want to test it out with a decent amount of customers, get their feedback, and you as the founder, you want to do it. You don't want to outsource this to somebody else because the consultants that's on Fiverr, they don't know your customers, but they're just coders. They're just designers, right? You're the one who's supposed to completely understand what the customer wants. So it's up to you to have very clear specifications of what the service process needs to look like, what the specifications need to look like. It's your job to gather those, and this is how you gather those. Okay, minimally repeatable product. After you have something that you're fairly confident about, minimally viable segment. You want to roll out this product to your smallest viable segment. Meaning if you're creating a babysitter app, right? You don't just like roll out to, all parents, right? Maybe you narrow down to like parents of teenagers. Like that's the market you go after first, because maybe parents with teenagers, they have slightly different needs than parents of like newborns, right? If you try to launch this babysitting product to all parents, right? You're going to have some requests for, okay, well, do they know infant CPR? And do they know how to schedule bottle feedings and change diapers, right? All of a sudden the product becomes super complex and super bloated. But if you choose a tiny narrow segment like teenagers, right? Then you're like, okay, you don't need bottle knowledge, you don't need diaper knowledge, you don't need infant CPR inside your product. So you choose a minimally viable segment that will help you prove out whether your idea is good. You just want to simplify your life as much as possible and get as much clarity and assurance that the problem is right, the causes are right, your solution is right, and the product that you're designing is executing appropriately. Once you have all of that locked down, then it's time to grow and to scale whatever product it is that you have. Because the moment that you turn on the pipeline for customers, you can't change the product that you have, or you can, but it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort. It gets very, very difficult once you start coding things, because the iteration life cycle is now very long once you have code in there. but just as long as it's an MVP, you can still iterate very, very quickly. Yeah. Okay. We already talked about that. I'm not gonna. Probably off topic. Okay. MVP types. Going from easiest, simplest, all the way to the toughest, most expensive, most cumbersome versions of MVPs. The picture that we have on the right over here, it's literally called the mechanical. And I'm sure you guys have heard of like, or maybe you've heard of like Amazon service, the mechanical Turk. What the mechanical Turk was there was this dude, the guy with the hat, that went around saying that he's created a machine that can outplay the best chess players in the world. Like he said it was a machine. So, you know, he brings this big old machine, and what the machine actually turns out to be is a person with a chessboard. He didn't create a machine at all, right? The brains behind it all is literally a person inside the box. But for all intents and purposes, on the outside, it's executing the way that it needs to execute. It's playing chess, and it's playing chess really, really well. You don't need to code everything inside the box. It just needs to mimic and give the customer, the chess player outside, the challenging chess game. That's all it needs to do. So whatever your concept is, whatever your solution actually is, think about what it needs to accomplish for the customer and think of the easiest way in which you can mimic that. Create yourself a mechanical Turk. And I'll give you another example of a mechanical Turk. If you guys have heard of Zappos, the online shoe company that eventually got bought out by Amazon, their idea, and this was, you know, back when Amazon was in its infancy also, their idea was, wouldn't it be great for people who can't find shoes that fit them in the stores to be able to go online and just buy their pair of shoes and buy their pair of shoes? Because sometimes people have like really narrow feet, really wide feet, really small feet, really big feet, whatever, right? They can't find the normal shoes. But the problem is, like, buying shoes online, that's kind of a really weird and dicey proposition in the, you know, in the nascent, you know, years of the internet. So they weren't really even sure if people would do that or what buying shoes online would even look like. And so they wanted to test out whether people would buy shoes online or not. And so they wrote up a website. It was literally a website with like listings of shoes, and then you can choose your size. And they were like, okay, you know, put it into the cart, and then we'll send you your shoes. They didn't build an e-commerce site. They literally built a website with like listings, and then this cart was like a form, like you sign up for a newsletter kind of form type of thing. You put in your, like, you know, credit card information, or you put in your checking information, and literally somebody on the other end looks at the entries in this form, cashes the check, or manually swipes the credit card, like looks at what pair of shoes it is, and like runs down to the local Foot Locker, buys the shoes, puts it in a box at USPS, and sends it off, right? And this was how Zappos tested out whether or not people would be willing to buy shoes online. They also learned from this entire experience that, okay, we need to provide free shipping, like to the customer and back from the customer for returns. And we also need to offer, like, you know, free returns, multiple sizing, like be willing to send multiple sizes to them at once and have them be able to return the rest of the sizes. They discovered all of that through the MVP process without having to build an e-commerce site, sign up for a credit card processing company, or any of that stuff, which would have been really difficult in the first days of the internet. So think very creatively about how you might set up a mechanical Turk system where it could literally just be a person in the background that's doing this. And if you're like, I have a full-time job and I only have one co-founder and we don't have time to do any of this, great, whatever, hire a virtual concierge. And there are plenty of those, right? Like you can look up virtual concierge service, and they're usually like virtual secretary services. So speaks English perfectly well, is probably stationed in some country where the average cost of living is relatively low, so you don't have to pay them very much, right? But if your service is, I'm going to match people up with like the perfect food truck location that's close to them, great. They input it into a form, and then maybe 10 minutes later, your virtual assistant is literally running a Google search on like, food trucks that are close by to them, and then sends them or like gives them an Instagram post on like the food truck listing. Think very creatively about how you might want to do this. Literally, Mechanical Turk can be one of these also, and you can pay piecemeal on per transaction. So like 25 cents at a time or something like that for each survey that's answered, right? Or each customer service call that's answered. Set up a virtual concierge service on the back end to try to prove out your concept.
So when you're saying that like you can use like surveys and forums, what kind of questions like how I'm assuming it has to be like, oh, would you buy this kind of question, right?
No.
I'm kind of confused.
Yeah. So oftentimes like the ideas that I hear from folks is like, I want to match up party A with party B with something or so, right? It's like some sort of facilitation application or mechanism. So think back to all that you're doing is, if I had to match up people, right? I would look at what A wants and what B wants, and then like put them together. So maybe the matching up service is literally, you fill out this form, tell me exactly what you want. And then this other person is like, what exactly are you giving up? And then it's somebody in the background that's trying to match up the two. Hell, it could be like Google Forms, and then it feeds into Google Sheets in the background, and it's a big ass VLOOKUP, right? That could work too. So that's how you might want to use forums and surveys. As San Francisco State students, you guys have free access to Qualtrics, and Qualtrics has a lot of logic built into it also. So it's even like, if I want, Air Jordans, whatever, Model 5, you can logic that to, oh, what sizes would you like? Oh, would you like X, Y, and Z? You can do that all through Qualtrics without really having to program anything either. And Qualtrics can also tell you like what path people are taking, right? And by extension, like what paths are they ignoring also. So even some pretty basic, like SurveyMonkey will do it also, and you can do that on a free trial also. So you can really use regular ass tools to build out this mock logic for you also, and see how customers will behave in those scenarios as well. So forums, survey, and forums. So forums, you would be surprised at how many startup ideas are really vetted and get their proof of concept on just Facebook. Like Facebook itself, it's a forum where people are posting back and forth about, buy, sell, trade, or, can you give me a recommendation on this or this or this or this, right? You can harness all of that discussion and some of those forum platform tools to try to extract, how people behave. Like you can literally use it to match people up. Hey, who's looking for, a vacation rental in X, Y, and Z, and then see who responds. And it was like, okay, like how about 3 bedrooms? How about 2 bedrooms? What about this location? You're doing it all manually, but at the end of the day, you're just there to test out whether your concept is appropriate, right? And what features, what standards, what specifications need to exist inside your product. That's all the MVP part is supposed to achieve. Yeah, it's going to be brutal. No, it's not going to scale. Yes, on a per user transaction, it's super expensive, but this is your minimally viable product to test out whether your idea is a go or no go. And all too often, people plunk down way too much money to go on an idea that should be no go because nobody wants it, or your solution doesn't address the problem. Yeah. Okay. So spreadsheet MVPs also oftentimes you can build a spreadsheet that actually does match up, solutions for people, match up responses for people. Also, you can automate a lot on Google Sheets in and of itself. You could create forms on Google Sheets and on Excel also, and just publish that sheet. Publish that sheet and like see how people use it, right? And be there to troubleshoot for people and answer questions for them and ask them for, well, what other features would you want? Like, what else would you want this like little tool and like the sheet to go ahead and do for you? And that's great customer feedback to help you define what features you need to have in that actual product also. It gets you so close to the customer that so often, you know, when people go down the route of I have a business idea, then you hire a bunch of like coders to build your prototype, and then they're like, great, now who's going to use the prototype? If you've built out these MVPs and you've created the Facebook site and you've engaged with people who have this problem, everybody's going to want to try out your prototype because you've been working with them this entire time. It's so much easy to get the slip in with them early on when you're developing this, and you tell them, hey, it's an MVP, like it doesn't cost you anything, just like work with me and talk with me about like what this needs to do and how it needs to function. You get their buy-in early on, and if you can build out a community around it, all the better, because now you have a built-in audience for that prototype once you want to launch. Yeah. Okay. The other things, and I'm going to go to the next slide for this, is the other type of MVP, and this is like when you are pretty confident about what you've learned up here in your other, simpler MVPs. You might want to go to a no-code solution, and then finally to coding and actual automation of your MVP. So there are a lot of no-code tools that are out there. So if there's going to be a website version or a phone app version of this, you might want to go with the no-code platform of some sort. So Zoho is really popular. I think Bubble, Bubble.io is like the tool of the day. It's super simple. Retool, Builder AI. All of these types of tools kind of allow you to drag and drop and create process flow, automated process, quote unquote, automated process flow. You're not actually coding, super easy. The learning curve is very, very shallow, especially relative to learning full-on coding languages or so. And they will build out enough functionality on something that might look like an app or might look like a website. And like ERP or, what do you call it? Software as service thing for people to interact with and start using without you having to code anything, without huge, cloud subscriptions or anything like that. The downside to these, I don't want to say problem, but the downside to these things is, in general, they'll charge on like a per user base. So each time you have like somebody come in and use and test out whatever, MVP it is that you've created, you might be paying like, anywhere from 10 cents to $1 or something like that, depending on how complicated the thing is. So just be mindful of that. The great news though is that you can iterate so quickly on this. It's because you're not recoding everything. You're literally kind of just like visually dragging and dropping components and their order and relationship to each other. So you can get customer feedback and then integrate it in very quickly. If you guys have ever built like, anything with like code, that once you start changing one thing, it might repopulate itself into several different other areas. And now you're debugging for like a long period of time. So to avoid all of that type of frustration, you can use one of these no-code solutions just to, again, still test out the process, the flow, how customers would interact, and how they would use whatever it is that you're building. And again, it scales slowly. It's not meant to handle like thousands of transactions or so. It's meant to kind of handle the hundreds of transactions or so. I will say this is the flip side to the no code stuff. The next step you would go ahead and take is actually to code out a solution. But before you move on to the coding out of the solution, your output from these no-code solutions should really help to define the specifications for what the coder needs to build out. A huge downside to these no-code platforms is the code's not going to port. Like, they're not going to let you take, you know, what Zoho has created on the back end over to your new product. But the idea is you now have an understanding from these no-code MVP, like the results from your no-code MVP. You have now the understanding of what the actual product needs to do, what steps, perhaps what databases need to exist, what pieces need to talk to what. You have firm understanding of that. And you can give that specification out to your coding team. So now your coding team can be a lot more efficient because the specs are just so much more solid and detailed at that point. Yeah. Okay. You know when you've achieved product market fit when you're busting at the seams on that no-code MVP. Like this, your refined MVP, there's way more demand for it than you can adequately service and supply with what you have currently. You need infusion of people, of money in order to take it to the next step. You can either go for investors or you can start asking for paying customers. So a paid development partner, a paid development partner at that point. So maybe it's like customer one, they've been playing around with the MVP and you're like, okay, like, you know, we got to take the training wheels off and move off of Zoho into like a custom built platform now. We're going to start coding. Give us a purchase order, right? And commit like $100,000 and we will build this first version alongside with you, right? But ask for a check at this point because they've had a chance to use this MVP. They know what it can do. They know that it addresses your problems. And if it's a problem that's really painful for them and it costs them $200,000 a year, $100,000 should be cheap for them, right? To help build out the solution. So you want to get to a point where you can start asking for paying customers to help you with that development too. And at that point, you should just be overwhelmed with demand. Yeah, that's when you know you can build out and start coding a product that is designed for automation, for cheap, easy, fast automation, because you have the demand. There's no reason to build out the whole thing that's designed for cheap, easy automation if you don't have the demand to suck up all that cheap, easy automation. Yeah. Up until you have that demand point, low, relatively expensive per transaction is fine because you're still proving out the concept to a point where there will be overwhelming demand. Like, I hate to use the word overwhelming again, but overwhelmingly, the number one cause for why startups fail is you make a product that nobody wants. That's the number one reason why startups fail. The second one is you run out of funding. And there are a couple of causes to why people run out of funding. One is they spend the money like building stuff that nobody wants, right? Or building stuff out before they know people want it. Or they start building out stuff before they know the clear specification of what they're supposed to do. Now, that's one thing. The second thing is like they spend way too long with that money trying to figure out what people want. So it's kind of a corollary to the first one, which is you're building something that people don't want. Start off clearly with knowing exactly what people want. And I think that's all I have for you guys in terms of the talk. Thoughts or questions or, you know, down the workshop-y stuff of like helping y'all take your next steps on building that MVP.
I have a question. So when I started with this idea I had a few months ago, I wanted to build this website or like an app to get this idea implemented, right? But I'm not a coder, I'm a major.
Yep.
Right. So the first thing I did, I made a mistake. I started by coding.
Hey, that's actually not bad. That's not a bad thing to learn coding either.
I knew a bit, but you know, like not like so high level. But I think that pretty time consuming for me. And it doesn't like get, I don't have time to work on the other stuff, project. So if I want to have or some kind of website, so should I just use the local MVP or is it any other possible way?
I would back up first. So the question is, I have this great idea. I wanted to build out an app or a website to start testing out my idea, not a coder. So solution to that was I'm going to learn how to code. And my advice on that is step back and validate the concept first. Like, I mean, you can continue to learn how to code just because you want to learn how to code or so, that's fine. But don't learn coding as a way to test out whether or not your concept is good or bad. Start talking to people who you believe have this problem and ask them whether they would buy your solution or why this problem exists. Why haven't they been able to solve that problem yet? And what have they tried? So do you mind if I share your idea?
Of course, yeah.
So the idea is international students or college students, they might want to eat more healthfully at home. And so it's a private chefing service or so to come over to the person's house for a pre-bid contract price of you cook X number of meals for me at like, $20 a meal or something like that. And the person will cook to those specifications. I'm gluten-free, would love hometown Mexican food from this region. And can you do it like, every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 o'clock or something like that. So those types of specifications. So I would go to people that I think have this problem and ask them, so what are you doing right now? I know that you're gluten-free and you love like Mexican food, like how are you solving that problem right now? And just listen to them. If they're just like, I'm not, because I go onto DoorDash and they don't list the dietary restrictions on there. I don't know what they're putting in there. It's all very expensive. So list off all the reasons why the status quo sucks for them. Why is the current situation completely unworkable for them? And then ask yourself, okay, how should I address the root reasons, causes of why they still have this problem? If it's like too expensive, can you do it cheaper than the existing solutions that are out there, right? So if they're like DoorDash is too expensive, and then you go look at all the Mexican places and the average check ends up being like, 20 some odd dollars, then they think $20 is too expensive and you're going to need to do it for cheaper. Can you do it for cheaper, right? Start formulating that way.
Thank you.
So this might actually kind of help. What makes for a compelling offering, a super compelling and clear concept or a business idea, right? Is I said unworkable, right? So why is the current problem situation unworkable for your target market? The other one might be like unavoidable. The person can avoid, like they can get around not having, gluten-free Mexican food. They can eat gluten-free, Indian food. They can eat gluten-free like Cajun food, right? They don't have to have. If the problem isn't unavoidable and if it's not painful enough, they don't have to buy your product. They can just kick the can down the road and it's like, it's okay, I'll live with it, right? And if they continue to live with the problem, they're still not going to buy your product or service, right? And this kind of goes hand in hand with urgent. The more urgent the problem is, the more people will be looking for that solution. So I think that that's another thing you probably have to address with your problem is what makes it urgent for somebody, right? Something like I prefer Mexican food over, Thai food or something like that. That's a preference. And that gets into a fuzzy territory where it's not particularly urgent. So you have to make the other pieces a lot more compelling in order for people to buy it. Other thoughts or questions?
So you said for the, you can like pitch your like idea on forums, right? Or on Facebook. So people really like give out like their ideas, Facebook or
No, you don't even have to position it that way. So the question is, I had mentioned how a lot of how a lot of great concepts have started out as Facebook groups, right? Or have started out on forums. The Facebook group, right, can be, it could be for, what do you call it? International students who crave home cooking. That could be the Facebook, right? And you can start it off by saying, hey, everybody come over to my house for, parathas, every Thursday, right? Or something like that. Or who else needs parathas? I'm making a big old batch or so, right? And then if you can build up that network of people who like are international students and are craving hometown food, because that's exactly who you're looking for. People naturally, that's why they're on Facebook. They're looking for their crew. So, and gradually on that Facebook, right? You just say like, hey, and like, what if there was a delivery service, right? What would you do? No, I'm not saying you should be like the covert spy on your own Facebook group or something like that, but you can learn a lot by being within a community also.
What kind of tone should you be approaching customers when you're trying to give them, like, you're trying to build a relationship?
Yeah. So the question is, what tone should you take with customers when you're trying to build a relationship with them? I would say genuine. Like that's the most important thing, is be completely genuine about it, that you want to solve their problems, because honestly, you do want to solve their problems, right? And be completely upfront, right? I'm thinking of a startup idea and I know this problem exists. Can you validate that for me? Like, can you agree or disagree that, yeah, that this is actually a problem? And just strike up a natural conversation with people. So when you're cold calling, like potential customers or something like that, the easiest in is not to try to sell them something like, hey, I'm looking to make this thing, would you buy it? Just say, I'm developing this thing because I think, don't say people like you, but people like you have this problem and I'm looking to solve it. Can you sit down with me for like half an hour? And like, I would love to learn more about like how you handle this problem right now, or like what's causing you problems with it right now. And literally just talk. And the great part about being part of the university is alumni love to talk to students, right? So go to the alumni database, see if you can find somebody within that industry, or go onto LinkedIn and like search San Francisco State and like, somebody who's within that industry that you're looking at, and then just reach out to them and say like, hey, I'm looking to learn more about, HR reimbursement issues in the telecom industry or something like that, right? Like, can I chat with you over Zoom for like, half an hour? Can I pick your brain for half an hour? And just be totally genuine about it, that you want to learn more about their problems. People love talking about
Venting.
yeah. Like venting on one end, and if they think you can somehow solve it for them, even better.
So let's say we have a scenario where we present our problem and they're kind of like assuming that they are genuine on their side. We have like and they're kind of, we feel like they're 50-50, like some part of them does want to go for our solution, but there's something to their back. So what should be our approach be to rather than further towards?
Yeah. So the question is, so you're presenting your solution to a prospect, and they're like, I'm not so sure if this is exactly the right solution for me. I would literally ask them like, what part is giving you hesitation, right? Like, and hope they give you an honest answer on that. Hope, like, if you position yourself as, I'm willing to work with you to help you solve your problem, be open to the possibility that you don't completely understand their problem, or your solution doesn't completely address the root causes of what their problem actually is. A lot of times when we create a solution, we do work under certain assumptions about what's causing their problems. One of the things you want to do ahead of time, though, it's called an Ishikawa analysis or a cause and effect analysis, is to arrive at the root causes of their problems. So if you want to learn more about it, it's Ishikawa or cause and effect, or it's also called a fishbone diagram. It's all the same thing. It comes out of manufacturing. And within manufacturing, there's a big old practice of trying to minimize defects. So if your final product has some sort of defect, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Mechanical engineers and ops specialists, they use these tools to try to find out where the source, the root cause of that defect actually is. So if you've identified a market problem, a problem that your customer supposedly has, you put that problem at the head of a fish. Right? So let's say the problem is, I don't know. What's a good problem? Package gets misdelivered. Package misdelivered, right? And if you think about the package delivery process, maybe there are customer related reasons why packages are misdelivered. Maybe there are carrier related reasons why the package is misdelivered. Maybe there are package related reasons why it's misdelivered. Maybe there are ITIS systems related reasons why the package is misdelivered. But then you would go through and you would try to identify the entire universe of reasons for why this happens. You want all the root causes of why this happens. So maybe you're like, package is misdelivered because the customer put down the wrong address. Why did the customer put down the wrong address? They didn't know the right zip code. Why didn't they know the right zip code? Oh, they're not in the same country. Right? So now you have a root cause of why the package didn't get delivered, right? They didn't know the zip code because they're in the wrong country, and so they wrote the wrong address, and that's why packages were misdelivered. Maybe the customer, like, I don't know, wrong apartment, or I don't know, what else? Mislabeled. Why did they mislabel? They don't know the regulations. Why don't they know the regulations? They don't send things a lot. Maybe they don't know the regulations because they are complicated for the country or something like that. Why you can't really do anything about it if it's complicated mailing rules for the country or so, right? But if you come down to this as a root cause, then maybe your recommendation is, okay, we auto-populate all of the complicated rules for that country into the mailing list, where once you press enter, it pops up. Do you have anything fragile? Do you have anything liquid? Is there lithium ion in there? Like, that checks off all the compliance boxes or so. That's your solution to this root problem. If you didn't do your homework up front on all the root problems and you create the solution and you present it to the customer, and your solution is, oh, I have this double check on zip codes, and they're like, well, that doesn't really solve my issue of not knowing the compliance rules, like for my country. That might, like, that's what I'm trying to get to, is like, you may have created a solution that addresses lots of root causes, but maybe not their root cause. So be open to the idea that your solution may not address their root cause. And you can sign them on as a development partner, right? Like, help us learn more about what's at the root of your problem, and we can help you develop the solution for it. Like just say, okay, you know, if it solves half of your problems, great. Work with us to automate solutions for the other 50% of what's causing the problem. Now,
Like one more scenario. If, for example, now the customers are like, from the perspective of solving the problem, they pretty much believe that our solution does the job. But now they're hesitant because it might add an additional step to their existing process or maybe additional costs, and that's what's holding them back. So how do I try to balance it? Like, where do I know the line between, okay, this customer might not be the part of the right audience that I'm trying to address, or maybe there is some other offering that I can add to my solution to improve audience.
that's an excellent question. So the question itself stems from having a solid grasp on what the value proposition is for the customer. And this is what I mean by it, is customers will only purchase if there's a good value proposition associated with whatever it is you're selling. By value proposition, customers generally think of a value proposition as what I get versus what I give up. Right? Easy enough, like not a formal formula, right? What they're thinking inside their head is like value 1, maybe they care about speed. Value 2, maybe they care about image. Maybe value 3, maybe it's risk management or something like that. So they have all of these values that they think that they're going to get out of you, up to value whatever infinity. And then they're thinking about what they have to give up. Oh, pain 1 plus pain 2 up to pain whatever infinity. Maybe the first pain is like, man, it's going to cost me money. Oh man, I'm going to have to hire more people, and that's more liability, like within HR. Oh, maybe it slows down the process because it takes an extra day to process or something like that. So now they're thinking inside their mind all of these different things that they have to give up. Just as long as whatever you're giving them, they believe they're getting more up here than they are giving up. So in the very early processes, when you do your due diligence, it's very important for you to completely understand what values are most important to them and what pain points, are truly painful for them. If money's no object, then there's no money involved, right? If it's like if it's an image thing, so a lot of companies, they don't want to work with Walmart because there's an image that comes with like working with Walmart that you're no longer ethical and stuff. The same thing with Palantir, like don't want to work with them because it looks shady. So think very clearly, and you might want to have this discussion with the customer, is like what's most important to you and what don't you care about. And you should be tailoring your solution around the most important values that they have. So if you're able to provide on that most important value, you just need to show on an economic level that they're getting more by you solving whatever it is that you solve versus the time or the cost. Maybe that value is, dude, we're saving you $10,000. You're spending 7 with us, but you're saving 10. And sometimes that type of calculus is needed also. But they may be like, oh, but it slows us down a day. Then back off and try to calculate out how much slowing down by a day will actually cost them. And then show them what they're getting up top. And if they come back and they're like, that's not, like, I don't care that much about that. Then you have a whole big problem because you created a product that the values are messed up on that product. And then maybe you do have to shift to a different target market that does have values that you need. And this is one of the reasons why you want to create the product with the target market and their problem in mind, and not, have created a product in a vacuum and then go searching for a target market. That part gets a lot. Okay. Other thoughts, question? Yay, okay. Well, thank you for coming. I appreciate you guys' enthusiasm, and if you want to announce anything about like CS pitch competitions or whatever, or.
Well, I believe in 2 weeks there is gonna be another workshop. Which one is what was the second?
I don't know.
Hold on. Because it was between the two we decided. One second. Oh wait, yeah, next one is actually gonna be on business models and KPIs. So do you want to give like a brief description of what that is?
Yeah, so business models, how do you actually monetize whatever it is that you're building out? So is it a subscription? Like, is it software as subscription? Is it like one-time licenses? Like, do you turn it into a franchise model? Is it freemium? Is it like what are all the different ways in which you can charge people and make it a stable, predictable form of revenue for your company? We'll go over a little bit how to think of the financial equation of a business. So how to form a business model around it. And then the KPI portion of it is how do you measure your success and growth within the company. So we'll talk about like how you get traction and how you measure that traction.
Yeah, it'll be in 2 weeks, same place, same time, November 6th. And if you guys are in like the ACM server, if you guys are gonna be in the INE server, we'll be announcing it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's also a couple drinks in the back. Those are ours. If you guys want to take one on your way out, go for it.
Thank you for coming.